Greetings everyone, this is ATV Languages. Today in our show we're going to talk about the political positions represented by women. And of course this is ignited by the current Ethiopian government move. Here with me, Salome Taddese, a media professional, activist on gender issue and everything in between. And Torbjörn Petersen, the Sweden ambassador to Ethiopia, and of course my audience by now will know why you're here. If not, you got to stick with me all the way. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with Salome. You know, you've been heralding this women empowerment agenda for years, and all of a sudden we have 50% of the women cabinet in our government and a female president. How does it feel for you? And did you expect it this soon to happen?
To be honest with you, I don't think it happened all of a sudden. I would like to believe that it's because it was tried and pushed for a very long time, and that it is overdue, past overdue. But also I'm appreciative of the political will of the Prime Minister. So one of my learnings is how important political will is, which we've seen when it is there, then it happens. Because just 6 months ago, the excuse given was that there are no women. We couldn't find them. But when you have the political will, then you can see them. So for me, the biggest learning is that, the importance of political will. Of course, I'm very, very excited about it. Did I expect it to happen this quick? No, I didn't expect it to happen this quick.
May I ask why? Why didn't you expect it?
I don't know. You try something for such a long time, and you don't get responses. Maybe you get into the mood of that they're not going to respond, but I'm going to push anyway until something like this comes and hits you, and then makes you realize that it can happen. Ethiopia has reached that point where it cannot ignore its 50% of the population anymore. For the question you asked me, how did I feel? My first reaction was justice is served. It wasn't, oh my God, I'm excited, but it's like you wait for justice for a long time and then it finally gets served. That was my feeling.
Well, let me give you a chance to respond on this. I know Sweden have a very good reputation in women empowerment and putting them in political position, especially. So would you please comment on the current reform that brings more women, Ethiopian women, into political power?
Well, I think I agree with a lot what you said. There's always a lot of excuses for not doing this. Prejudiced, male-biased societies, and we were no different and are no different. I mean, we have been extremely successful in Sweden on political representation. For many years it's been kind of, governments are always 50-50. Parliament of course varies a little bit, but it's always more or less 50-50, and I think it has been important. But along the road there has been ups and downs, and there are always excuses. We can't find any women. I mean, very bad excuses.
I'm going to come later with that later, but would you please respond to the current reform of the Ethiopian government?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's very good. I think it didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, the reform agenda activists, the Swedish embassy works with a lot of the movements in Ethiopia, Setawit, Yellow Movements and others. So of course the pressure has been there, and I think also I wasn't well, I was maybe surprised on how far it went, but that's very good. But there's also an international pressure, I think, building up on all new rulers that, you know, the Me Too movements, the global debate has been very intensive the last years. So I think the awareness, and you have a Prime Minister who is very aware of these kind of things, has helped as well.
Well, but there are critics already, you know, this is just a representation. The president can't do anything other than this protocol works. And even the minister, they are not in a position to put some real change in the position they are feeling. So what's your response?
I don't know where that comes from, especially for the ministers. First of all, because when you are 50%, you're already a critical mass. And when you are a critical mass, it means you can change things you can influence policy, you can influence strategies. You already have the number, the 50% number. That makes it a critical mass, first of all. Secondly, I was actually very excited because the positions that women got are not the usual traditional positions. We have a Ministry of Defense, we have a Minister of Transport, we have Ministry of Peace, and you have seen the kind of organizations that go under the Ministry of Peace. So to say these positions are nominal, I don't know where that comes from. The position of the president, of course, even in the Constitution, that is the role of the presidency, whether it's a man or a woman. So it's not like the men were doing anything with it, because it is a position of ceremonial position. But with Ambassador Sahlberg, actually, I know for sure she's going to make it more than that, because she will have an agenda. She has an agenda, and you can use the office to advocate that agenda. So I don't know where that criticism would come from, because you are 50%, and you have the best ministries, the most influential ministries were given to women.
We're following the parliamentarian system, and the Prime Minister had the ultimate power. And even if she is capable, there is as such nothing to work on her side. What do you think she...
You mean the president?
Yeah, I'm talking about the president.
Oh.
So what do you think she would bring?
For example, in her speech, she said she would work on women's issues and on peace.
Peace, yeah.
When you want to work on something like that, you need a space, you need an office, you need an influence. And she would have that influence locally and internationally. It could be advocating it internationally, it could be advocating it locally, it could be supporting other women who are doing this work, but she would give you her political hand, if you wish, or her influential hand. So I think in that area she would make a difference.
Yeah, let me come back to the point that you've been talking earlier. You know, Sweden has, as you said, 50% of representation, not only in politics, actually, it's also in economic arena. But what are the basic factors that push this success at the beginning?
We are not where we want to be in the business arena.
Yeah,
I think.
of course.
If you look at the big corporates, we are not 50-50 there, and it's the current struggle. But to make it simple, I think it's many decades ago when this change started, and it's not only about representation, it's about rights, it's about financial resources. But as you know, Sweden is one of the richest countries in the world with the highest level of social welfare. It is impossible to get to that position without having women as represented as men in politics, in economics. So it basically was driven by two things. First, the right, the ideology, of course, that this is not the patriarch we don't want this to be a patriarch society, we are equal, everyone should have equal rights and so. And second, economy. You know, to have women in equal access to power, to resources and so, is smart economics. You can't see any country in the world that's come to the level of welfare which we have, where women have been subordinated. So it goes with the economic progress, and I think that was a driver. Now, we would of course defend anyway the position that there should be equal rights, but it's also smart economics. So I think that was a driving factor. Sweden went through a very strong growth period. Women were engaged, got jobs, got salaries, were working in more and more responsible positions. So that was a driving factor as well. Plus, of course, strong advocacy. We had the same type of strong organizations pushing for this, because women's rights come. There's always, as I said when I started, there's always poor excuses for not having. We can't find them. They're not trained. They have to be home with the kids. Blah blah blah. You have all this, which of course is nonsense, because all these things you could say equally about men. I mean, if you look at kids, they are created by a man and a woman, so there are two, obviously, and all these things that was there as well. But I think the strong advocacy, ideological struggle, combined with the necessity of growing economically. But I would, if I may, can I comment on your question before on this representation? Because, of course, the Ethiopian debate, I read it, I observe it, I have my views. I won't go too deep in that as an ambassador of another country. But I recognize very much this, that, it's only visibility and so. But, you know, in 2018, visibility, role models that are visible are so important for the real changes to come along. And I mean, I met your new president, Sahle-Work, and to me it's just one of the most competent presidents in Africa, maybe in the world. Extremely experienced, extremely capable. And I bet my 2 beers that she will be the one invited to Davos, to the UN General Assembly. She will be the face of Ethiopia. Yes, it might be ceremonial, but of course, to have that kind of role model with that skill and capacity is enormous, even if you call it ceremonial or something. So I think one shouldn't underestimate that, because always, but it has always been like that. But I think in the world we live in today, the visibility of role models, the face of Ethiopia's officials is, of course, extremely important.
I may add one thing. When I was working on the program Yenya, and when we used to work in the countryside, mainly in Amara region, in small waradas, one of the biggest challenges is when you go to school, at the primary level, it's 50-50. 50% girls, 50% boys. Immediately when you go to high school, it drops fundamentally, because the girls have to go to the zonal areas to go to high school. And when you talk to parents, they choose between a boy and a girl, whether to send the boy, because they have to pay for them living there, or a girl. And of course, one of the biggest reasons they will tell you, why did you choose a boy, is they say, for her, even if she learns, where would she go? What difference would it make? But if he finishes high school, he would become somebody. And one of the reasons the parents say this is because they don't see women getting anywhere. Believe me, if we went back to Injabara today, to these places, or to Dambaja, and asked the father, do you think your girl will get somewhere? Because he saw Ambassador Sahle-Work, he would say, yeah, I think she will. Because he saw the 50%, he would say. And the issue of role model, when I was growing up, there was only one woman who used to come on television, and that was Ambassador Yodi Timiru. Yeah. And my father would always tell me, and I was in 4th grade, come, look, you'll take her job. And I even think that's why I studied international relations, because that was stuck in my head, that I could be like her. So it can even influence the education of girls, because parents would start believing more and more on girls.
Yeah, actually, you've answered my next question already, so I'm going to move the next one. It's very interesting. You know, in Ethiopian history, if you go back, we have, you know, a very few powerful women in our history, but, you know, we don't see actually, even the women we have in the ruling party, APRDF, they're not assigned in foreign affairs minister or the defense or military, any higher military positions. So, what do you think is the reason? Is it all about the stereotyping, or there is some kind of, you know, job which is tougher for a female?
I don't believe that, because there have been many women also who've been in those positions. There are many in our history, and there are many in recent times. We have all held positions, different kind of positions, and I mean, the story is there to tell, like who performed better, did we not perform. I always say, we forget that this is a political question. When you say 50-50, it is a power question. You know what I'm trying to say. If I take the 50%, some guy is leaving. So at the end of the day, the equality question is always a power question. That's one. The second thing is, all our institutions are built for men. They are not built for women. So even when we enter them, I always tell the story of the giraffe and the elephant. The giraffe built a beautiful house, beautiful, that he even won an award, with high ceilings, tall doors, but very narrow. And he one day invited the elephant to visit him. Not because he liked him, but once he entered, the elephant couldn't just survive within that house. So systemically also, besides appointing women, we also have to look at the institutions systematically. Are they feasible for women? So I think all this has been happening because of stereotype, because gender question is also a political question. It is a power question. So there is a power struggle there. And also the institutions are not built
that way. Let's come to Sweden. Did you face the same challenge? I mean, I heard that even the foreign policy is called a very feminine. I don't know. You tell me the detail. But did you face at the beginning, you know, some political positions secured for men politicians instead of the women?
Well, if you look long back, it was like that. There were very few women in the ministry and so, and they maybe were not on the highest or what was considered the most important. It took quite many years till we get our first female Minister of Finance, for example. I happened to work with her, and it was excellent change, but it took quite some time to get there. But I think the realization, and of course where we are today politically, is I think we are pretty renowned because we decided to have a feminist foreign policy. So that's one typical area where we not only is it led by women, my ministry, but it's also the gender equality issues are at the very center of everything we do. And I think that's so important, that because if you don't only look at who is where and who is a man and who is a woman in the government, but if you look at the change that you want, the transformation that you need. I've worked in development for many years, and I've been a bit worried when many African countries have chosen to have what we sometimes call a gender machinery. So you have a women's rights ministry or something like that, and there all the right things are said and so, but they tend to become a little bit isolated. We pushed very hard, actually here in Addis at the Financing for Development Conference 2014, that we invited ministers of finance, whether they were men or not, to the gender discussions, because that's where you need to see the change. Of course, you should work with someone responsible to look at the broad picture of gender equality in the government and in the society generally. But you also need to get the issues into, you know, women, peace and security is fundamental to silencing the guns in Africa. Resources, as I said, to make women actors economically, to take decisions about their own life, has an enormously positive effect on the welfare of all. And then you need to look at finance and that kind of institution. So I think that it reflects, I hope, I don't know yet, I haven't met them yet, I hope to see them in the coming weeks, but I hope that the decision by the Parliament also reflects this will to kind of broaden the issues into, that is not only about the representation, which is important, but also that it will have effect on the policies. So that's my hope, and I maybe it's too much to say, but I think that the general experience is that having female leaders at the top changes somehow it's not a given. I mean, we're all individuals and we are different and so, but the general picture is that also changes a bit what kind of issues do you address.
Just to add on it, in our country in general, where I believe we are at a very critical time, a juncture, a crossroad, if you wish. We're all filled with hope, but at the same time with anxiety, because something major change is happening within Ethiopia in general. And when change like this happens, you cannot address issues doing the same thing that you've been doing. Because doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome is madness. That is a sign of madness. So this kind of transformation is going to also to demand a different action. And one of the different actions for me is this. Because when you bring women to the table, you're not just bringing gender, you are bringing different perspectives. You are bringing different action, different way of looking at the country, looking at the world, you know, so we need all kind of diversity we can bring for us to take this change to wherever we want to, you know, to take it. And not to include 50% of your population in that perspective is just madness for me. So in that way, like he said, it's not just because they're women or Ministry of Women, but because they will have a different perspective on finance, a different perspective on defense, on different perspective on every topic, every issue. And the beauty of greatness for me is difference. It's not sameness. In sameness, there is no greatness. So,
yeah, interesting. You know, you talked already about having a model for you know, a child, a girl in a rural area or whatever. But let's talk about the tangible economic benefit. I mean, what do we have to expect from those female politicians? You know, what would be the tangible economic benefit that will be gained because they are there?
Okay, I'll throw that question back to you. What is the tangible economic benefit because we have me?
So you're saying you don't have to expect anything?
I rest my case.
But there is expectation.
No. I rest my case. Because economic benefit, for me, is about your policies. It is not whether the person implementing those policies or thinking those policies is wearing a pant or a skirt. It is not.
Yeah, I know. But
we've had so many men in this country, and nobody has ever asked them, what is the benefit for us because you are a man? Nobody. For me, this by itself is a stereotype. It is a very stereotypical question. You know what I'm trying to say? So, and we need to be very careful. We judge women and men, all our politicians, by their policy, regardless of their gender, we judge them. We didn't benefit economically. Okay, whether they're men or women, it was a wrong economic policy. They didn't perform. We will judge them equally. You know what
but I know, I perfectly understand what you're saying, but the reality out there, even the politicians themselves are giving some kind of promise that just because they are here, they try to address the economical issues of especially the women, you know, and whether we like it or not, there is some kind of reality out there.
I'm saying let's be very careful of the narrative. You know what I mean? The narrative that we create. Because it's the narratives that we create that becomes a reality, you know. So we need to start to challenge it. I was just telling the ambassador, the same thing, the assumption that because you have women, the country is going to be peaceful. You know what I'm trying to say? That does not have, it's not necessarily, you know, correlated to it. So we need to tone down this narrative. First of all, we need to say it's a human right. Like, whether she benefits this person, she doesn't benefit that person, we'll look at it as a system. But being 50-50 is basic, fundamental human right. We respect it for that. I also believe that women bring a different kind of leadership style, and this is well studied, which is more cooperative. Men give directions, women allow people to take their own directions. When you do that, you create conversation. You listen. So employees feel valued. They own the issue. It takes longer, a little longer, but it is more sustainable. Emotional intelligence, which has become very popular everywhere. And there are books written and people are taking trainings on it. Emotional intelligence is what it is. So they will bring all those issues that is different to the table. You know what I mean? But for us to say, okay, Minister of Defense, because you are a woman, what are you doing to this woman or for this woman is actually a pressure on the women that we have put on the position. Because first and foremost, she is there to be the Minister of Defense. And then as a nation, as a leadership, all of them are supposed to care about men, about women, and about girls.
Okay, I'm going to forward that same question to you too. With their expectation from the public or some kind of human right or gender right activist, at the very beginning when women come to power in Sweden.
Absolutely, and they're still. It's not only at the very beginning, because of course there's a lot of assumption, prejudice, male-biased ideas in society, and there are people have perceptions about the role of men and role of women, and that's nothing you change by the composition of a government or from one election to the next. So yes, it is a reality, as you say, that there are other not always outspoken, but somehow expectations of men and women. I agree fully with you that of course this is not about being a man or a woman. It's about doing a good job on with your portfolio as a minister. So, however, I think we shouldn't, if I say I'm a feminist, which I am, I mean, we shouldn't deny ourselves some facts. If you look at peace processes where women have been involved, they are normally more sustainable, more successful. They don't relapse into conflict as fast as before. They define security a bit different than when you only have men at different sides of the table. And that's a reality. It's not about women being different in a genetic or theoretical way. It's more they bring their experience, and we can't afford not to have that experience. I think in the gender area, in the economic area, we see the same things. But so I am quite convinced that if the change now is carried out, I mean, you will have I have never been to a cabinet discussion in Ethiopia, but I'm quite sure they will sound quite different from how they sounded a year ago because of this change.
Sure.
And it's not about the genes, it's not about that, but it's about using all necessary experiences in society to solve challenges, to solve conflicts, to be affluent. If Ethiopia wants to be a middle-income country, maybe this will turn out to be one of the most important steps taken. So I think that you're both right. I mean, there is an expectation, but it's important not to say that, you know, now we have a minister who's a woman, and therefore that policy area will change. Of course it's not. I'm still be talking to Dr. Workner when it comes to women, peace and security. But, so the important thing is, what will the discussions and the advice be on in the cabinet on these issues?
Yeah.
Just to add
Go ahead.
I agree that women in peace processes in countries where women were involved were more sustainable. They were more sustainable because women brought different perspectives to the table, not because they're gabash women. And I worry about this repeating because we were just discussing outside. People would tell you, oh, they're our mothers, they're our sisters, so everything will be okay. We're nobody's mothers or sisters. We're just Ethiopian citizens who are capable, who are educated enough, who are articulate enough, who are asking a seat at the table. Because this narrative in the long term is, first of all, it's a diminishing narrative. Secondly, it's a wrong narrative to just expect, just because one woman is a mother, that she's the most peaceful person on earth is, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I know. I have been reading the World Economic Forum recent report of 2017, and it's the annual report, and it says the gender gap in assigning positions is narrowing every decade by just 4%. Very shocking, right? And it even says it could take us even 100 years before a woman get the same wage payment like her male counterpart. Even for you, for your country, I mean, very progressive in this regard. How does it feel, and how are you working on that?
You're right. It's a question, I think, globally in all countries, and it goes far too slowly. And of course, we are happy that it's been narrowing, but there's still quite a lot of work to do. So what do we do? We have used all kind of instruments. So you have it's illegal to discriminate wages. So if you have same or similar jobs, you should have a same or similar salary, depending on what it is. The difficulty has been in comparing You know that certain jobs are considered more complicated and they are carried out by men, and others are more women-dominated areas and they are lagging behind. So we have that challenge. We work with it. Unions are very active in Sweden in pushing this issue, and they have there's a legal right for that. But it's difficult.
What are these jobs that are complicated in the handle?
No, but you have this kind of, just to give an example, I've been an employer in different capacities for many years, and what you typically hear is they say that a nurse job is not so complicated, but a police is more complicated. So. And then you have to start to get the debate. Is it really, or is it just the bias of the patriarch bias that you have in society? And after a while you come to the conclusion, no, actually it's on the contrary, maybe. Also, so, but you have these difficulties in comparing different jobs because in Sweden, like in I think most of the world, much of the social service sector, like taking care of children, taking care of old people, and so is dominated by women. And they are normally a little bit less paid than areas where you're building houses or bridges or things like that. And then if you start looking at that, you see that it can't be because the education level is the same or even higher in the women-dominated areas. The stress, the responsibility you have within the job is the same. So then it's quite obvious that this is because of patriarchal structures, basically. So when we say we have a feminist policy, it's not only about being equal, it's about also revealing the underlying structures which are age-old in Sweden like in Ethiopia. So you have to address and work with those issues as well. But we don't have, and I certainly don't have an answer to how do we narrow this gap faster. More than to say that you need to work with it, you have to make it visible, discuss it. Is this reasonable, or is it something else that can?
And also some kind of disruption in the systems that we built for ages. Because these systems that we built are archaic. They've been there forever. So you wonder what kind of systemic shift needs to happen or disruption needs to happen.
Can you please elaborate more on that feminist foreign policy? What are the features that makes it feminist?
I think the big difference, I'm very positive. I mean, I would have to be since I'm an ambassador, but I think I worked many years with these questions in different ways. And gender equality is something we've always been famous for. We work with internationally as well as locally. When we added the term feminist, there was quite a long debate among different parties. Today you have almost the entire parliament very convinced, not everyone, but almost, that this is the only way forward. And I think the difference is that we have to look at structure, not only on having equal rights, but say, so why doesn't it happen? Why is it that we still have this gap in salaries, in the boardroom of the big companies? There's still a majority of men, very few women. So all these areas which are not visible, there you still have these structures. So it's about working with structures, and we say we try to narrow it down to three things. One is representation, which is what we have seen a dramatic and fantastically positive shift in Ethiopia now. It's about visibility, role model, all what we have talked about. The second is rights. So which right? I mean, rights are for all human beings, whether they are men or women. But of course, we work very hard here in Ethiopia and everyone to support sexual and reproductive rights, women's rights to choose, to make choices, which is an area where you have seen less progress. And the area where you, as you quoted the Davos report, the area where you have seen less progress globally as well as in our own country is on resources. You still have a very unequal, the inequality is still huge. So what we have said is that's what we need to work with. And you use techniques like gender budgeting, how much of a state budget or a private budget goes to things that are more important to women than men and so forth. So this is what we call a structural approach, which means that that gender equality is not only about certain visible issues and so, but it's about looking into all areas. Which experiences have we missed out on that are more associated with women normally, because they come from those experiences. So that's what a feminist approach means, as opposed to gender equality more generally.
We're here, and the struggles that you have been making, I think this is an achievement by itself. But where do we go from here? What will be the next struggle issue, you know?
I have been talking to my other female friends who have also shouted, written, worked for this kind of right to happen. And I have been saying, okay, now the ball is in our court. The ball used to be in their court. And then it was easy to say, bring the ball, bring the ball.
Yeah,
now the ball is here. So what is next? For me, first and foremost is to try and find a way how we can create a support mechanism, a network. Like for me to assume, for you to assume, for every woman especially to assume her success is my success. And what do we do every day in everything that we do? You as a journalist, me whatever I am doing, how do we make sure that this brings about success? And what is our role in that? What kind of support systems, network systems can we create for this women? So instead of saying now she's there, let her do it, how do we all do it in a way that supports that she is what she is doing? And then in general what the government is doing at the second level. The second thing is, for example, I always say the success in West Africa, in Ghana especially, is that women in government and women in civil society work together. They work like this. In Ethiopia, our culture has been you work against each other. Yeah, it's us and them. So how do we now end this and say, wherever we are, whether we are on this side or on the other side, we work on the same agenda. How do we start collaborating? This, for me, is more of a paradigm shift than an actual thing. Every woman now in this position needs to sit down and think. She can't do it alone. She's going to need every help she can get. And that help is out there for free. And for me, I always say, leadership is not about what you do. It is about what you enable others to do. Your job is to facilitate. I always say a leader is a DJ. DJs don't dance. They play the right music so that everybody can beautifully dance. So I also want to invite these women and bring about that paradigm shift, play their DJ role so that all of us can play any small role that we can have, you, me, him, the ambassador, anybody who wants this to succeed. So that is the next step.
Yeah, but as an activist, I know that you've been in Women in Business. It's an association, right? That Women in Business gather. AWIP, yeah. But what would be the next chapter, you know, in the whole meaning of putting women in political position actually goes back to the economic benefit. I think the final issue will be securing the economic benefit of women having their equal share. That's the ultimate success. So how do we go through that path? And one way is the association, the big coming together. Who's going to start that platform?
But there are organizations already. I mean, like you mentioned yourself, there is the ministry by itself, and there have been many packages. You know the economic package.
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah.
It's there. It's still out there. That needs to be reviewed if that's what it takes. And I'm also hoping. So there are many things that are already taking place. I'm also hoping that if the NGO law changes, which it's supposed to happen in October, we're going to create more and more forums where these things can be discussed, where advocacy can happen, economic advocacy.
Can I add on that? I'm obviously not an activist. I'm a diplomat, so we don't. I don't
try even know what activist means.
But we started at the Swedish embassy about a year ago, or a little bit less than that, a gender network of Ethiopian feminist organizations working with this. And I was surprised. I've been surprised to see, because it was an idea we came up with, that let's do something, because we as Swedes, we can share our experience and so, but what is happening here in Ethiopia? And I discovered, of course, that you had the government on one side, you had the civil society, and there was tension and so. So we said, I invite everyone. I don't, I'm here as an observer, as a diplomat, as someone who can facilitate and so. And that has now become an extremely potent network, which I think can be used to strengthen. And I do agree, it's about economy, like you say, of course, but it's also about media freedom. Tomorrow we have a 2 days workshop at our embassy with Ethiopian organization discussing women in media. In a couple of weeks, together with Setawit and the Yellow Movement, we start a new exhibition called What She Wore, which is about victimization of women and sexual abuse and so forth. So we raise questions that are important, or we support partners to do that. And I think that now is a time, and it's always a time, but now you have kind of getting the momentum which all these organizations, all these individuals out there can build on. So supporting the change and making it not only a change in representation, but also a change in the content of what issues to discuss. And hopefully, I don't know yet, but hopefully I will get men and women ministers to those meetings to listen and draw on the Ethiopians that are out there and doing a fantastic work already in organized and as individuals and so forth. So I think that's the next step now, build on this. And there's in a way the PM and the Parliament has as you said, you put it better than me, he's put the ball in your lap, so now let's move with it. Let's move, make it move now and start being active and so. And we are there as supporters, as development partners and facilitators of meetings, and I think that I hope that I'm sure there are many other embassies who'd be happy to do the same things.
Thank you. Before I wrap up, one final question for you. Maybe nationally speaking, is there any, you've been mentioning most of the cases, but actually, is there any specific experience that we should take as beginners to incorporate more women in political positions and every decision making actually?
What was so positive with this is not only the 50-50, but it is also that eyebrows were raised when you saw which post the ministers get. I think it's so important because unfortunately when you talk about the age-old gender equality agenda, people are not so nothing much happens because it's well known. And it goes back to old struggles, and of course they're important. But when you enter, when you do the unexpected, whether it was right or wrong, of course, I don't know. No one knows on a specific post, and so I'm sure that all the women will do good because there's been so many men in history everywhere who hasn't done good. So of course it will be better when you use 100% of your capacity in the country. But I think to do the unexpected, to go into areas where you wouldn't expect the normal kind of gender rhetorics or narrative to apply, that I think is my experience, that's when things start to change for real.
Thank you so much, my guest. It's been a pleasure having you in our studio. Well, dear viewers, that wraps up what we have for you in this edition. Join us every day for this and other programs at ETV Language. This is Ahak Lilu, your host, along with the studio crew, saying bye-bye.